What was Michael's passion in life?
He really got the bug for music, and he was into beatboxing and rap and hip-hop. He was doing a lot of his own marketing, and he would sell tickets to people, cold sale.
That's the way business was done, and cash businesses are always targets.
A stranger walked up to him and simply shot him in the head.
His car, his cash are gone.
Did they find a clue that could lead to the killer?
It wasn't his DNA on the cigarette, but someone else's.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to Las Vegas, Nevada, Sin City. An aspiring hip-hop artist was found shot dead in the parking lot the day he was set to perform. Police had little to go on, but a clue found at the scene was their only hope to solve the case. It led to a killer and put a stop to his murderous crime spree. Las Vegas, where some dreams are born, while others wither on the vine. Some in Vegas create their dream by reinventing themselves, like Michael Portaro.
Michael Portaro was a really well-regarded young man. People loved him, and he was a very kind and giving person. And when he turned about 22 or so, he really got the bug for music. And he was into beatboxing and rap and hip-hop and recording and really promoting a career aspiring to be a hip-hop artist.
Michael recognized that this was a genre of music that he really connected with, that he felt he could express himself with. He created a name for himself and performed on the name Mikey P. He was performing. He had a partner, and they were getting ready to do a concert.
Michael was so consumed with making music, he built his own home studio. He made home recordings, pressed his own CDs, and sold them out of the trunk of his car.
He was doing a lot of his own marketing and ticket sales, and he would sell tickets to people, cold sale for a concert the next day, sell CDs out of his car, having quite a bit of cash on him at times.
Mikey was getting ready to do a concert the very next night. He was his own promoter. In those days, that's the way business was done, and cash businesses are always targets.
And he was in the parking lot of a local brewery, and an unknown assailant shot him cold-blooded in the head and left him to die in the parking lot. Las Vegas police arrived at the scene and found Michael dead in the parking lot.
Police noticed right away that there are no shell cases lying around, so they surmised that he was shot with a revolver, because a revolver, the cases are not ejected as you would have with a pistol. There's some loose cash lying around. Two very important things were missing. One, his vehicle was gone. Two, he had a large roll of cash because he'd been selling tickets, and that was gone too.
Police located a camera pointed right at the parking lot where Michael's body was found.
Police got a major break when they uncovered some closed-circuit surveillance, and it showed Michael next to his car, and another car pulls up. He leans into the vehicle and is actually selling a CD and concert tickets for his upcoming show, when all of a sudden a man wearing a hoodie walks up to him, and they exchange words for just a matter of minutes.
What did police observe in the video happening between Michael and the man in the hoodie?
We see a man approach, a black man, and he approaches Mikey, and he's got a cigarette. And Mikey and this man appear to talk. They appear to have a conversation. They appear to be engaged.
There appears to be an argument, and the next thing you know, Michael is dead in the parking lot. So it appeared that he had been attacked by a stranger who had walked up to him and simply shot him in the head.
His car, his cash are gone. So as the police begin their investigation, they consider a variety of possibilities. Was this a robbery gone bad? Had something else occurred? Was it a drug deal? So what was the real story? What happened?
Detectives searched the surrounding area for Michael's Nissan, hoping that it might contain evidence of the killer's identity.
Within a day, the police found his stolen Nissan abandoned over in an adjacent North Las Vegas community where it was torched. And obviously the killer had stolen his car and abandoned it and tried pouring an accelerant in the vehicle and lighting it on fire, but the car was left largely intact.
And this is a clue that this isn't just a random car theft, that whoever took that car was covering their tracks and doing all that they could in a very premeditated way to get away with murder.
Cops had a murder on their hands and few clues as to a motive or who killed Michael Portaro. It was a frustrating whodunit. What motives did police consider when investigating this murder?
They did not have a lot to go on. They explored the possibility that perhaps he could have been involved in a drug transaction. He was observed leaning into a car just prior to the shooting. Also, his ex-girlfriend and he had parted ways, and she ended up dating an MMA fighter, so they explored the possibility that could this be domestic violence, some kind of love triangle, but as the investigation proceeded, they were able to rule both those scenarios out.
Pretty soon the police realized that Mikey hadn't been involved in any criminal activity. This was no drug deal gone bad. But this young aspiring rapper with his future before him found dead on a sidewalk like this was shocking, even in Las Vegas, and captured the interest of people because they wondered, well, what had happened? How did this go down?
It was a very high-profile story in Las Vegas because, it's your worst nightmare. You just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. A good person who was living by society's rules and someone just comes up and shoots him in the head in a parking lot. It's just such a shocking crime.
Police were at an impasse. They looked for a motive but didn't yet have the full picture of what happened. They began to consider that perhaps Michael wasn't the only victim.
Right after Michael was killed, they started looking at other crimes in the area. Was there anything in the area that happened that was similar? And lo and behold, there was. There was a couple that had been carjacked at gunpoint.
The police realized that this was a violent carjacking, and another carjacking had occurred just hours before, involving the same kind of vehicle that Mikey had, the same Nissan Altima.
And the description of the assailant was remarkably similar. Black male wearing a hoodie, carrying a revolver, and it just seemed to line up. It was around the same time, in the same area, so the police really felt like these two events could be connected.
Investigators didn't know who the man in the video was, but they now knew he was the killer.
This could be some kind of rivalry or disagreement within the music community.
Police investigating the brutal murder of hip-hop artist Michael Portaro had made baby steps in finding the killer. They had him on video, but he remained anonymous and free to roam the streets of Las Vegas, perhaps seeking out his next prey. Police wondered if the killer was part of the hip-hop community and knew Michael.
Las Vegas is obviously the scene of the most high-profile hip-hop murder of all time, which is Tupac Shakur. And so the Las Vegas police investigators were very seasoned in this world.
In 1996, Tupac Shakur was the undisputed king of rap. While riding in a car on the streets of Las Vegas with Suge Knight, the head of Death Row Records, Tupac was killed in a drive-by shooting. Cops believe the murder was driven by rivalries in the rap community. Now Las Vegas police wondered if Michael's murder was a similar scenario.
With his connections to the hip-hop community, they certainly explored the possibility that this could be some kind of rivalry or disagreement within the music community. In the long haul, though, that was ruled out as well.
Police had a grainy video of a suspect, but he remained an elusive phantom. And there was a cigarette recovered from the crime scene. If they could match it to the man who left it, it could lead to the killer.
Las Vegas police really put a lot of their hopes on this investigation toward the cigarette butt that was found underneath his body. It appeared it had fallen there at the same time as Michael was shot. It did not appear to be just some random item that happened to be there. It appeared to be related.
The police had the cigarette examined for any DNA evidence. There's a strong likelihood that it's going to leave behind evidence that will identify whoever was smoking that cigarette. And one thing police learned right away is that that person was not Mikey. It wasn't his DNA on the cigarette.
And they entered it into the database. A DNA sample from the cigarette butt of known offenders did not get a match. However, that doesn't mean it wasn't a very valuable piece of evidence, because some old-fashioned police work, you can identify a potential suspect and then compare it to the DNA evidence secured from the scene, and really pinned all their hopes on trying to get an identification off that piece of evidence.
Solving the murder of Michael Portaro had become a race against the clock. Police knew there was a killer on the streets, and they thought it was only a matter of time before he struck again. And then they had an idea.
Both the Las Vegas police and Michael's family came together to offer a sizable reward, and they hoped that by putting a monetary award out there that they would get some valuable tips, some new information.
And that leads to a break in the case, because they get an anonymous tip that leads them to the suspect. The tip turns out to be true gold, because the caller informs the police that the killer is Brandon Hill.
Brandon Hill was just recently arrested for carrying a concealed firearm, and the police looked back and found out, hey, we've confiscated this individual's revolver. And they knew that Michael's homicide was committed with a revolver. So they proceeded with ballistic tests and were very pleased to find out that the gun lined up with the firearm that was used in the homicide.
They know that's the murder weapon. This is a major break in the case. They know they have their man. They know who it is. The challenge now is to prove that he is the one who not only had the gun, but used it to kill Mike.
This case wasn't a solve it overnight type case. It was a kind of a whodunit for several months. And so the video surveillance combined with the tip, combined with DNA evidence, it was just a huge break for them to be able to really know that they had the right guy in their scopes.
What else did police do to confirm that Brandon Hill was the killer?
They had a witness to the second carjacking who got a pretty good look at the assailant, and after the police connected the dots on Michael's homicide, they did a photo lineup, and the victim of the second carjacking was able to confirm that it was in fact Brandon Hill who had robbed them at gunpoint.
The police have most of the pieces of the puzzle, but there is still one important piece they need to be able to prove in court beyond a reasonable doubt. They have to prove that Brandon Hill killed Mike. So they turn to the evidence that can set this case on fire, the cigarette butt.
They subsequently were able to get a DNA sample from Brandon. Then they cross-referenced it and confirmed that the cigarette under Michael's body had Brandon's DNA on it. So it was yet another huge fact in confirming that he was at the scene and, in all probability, the killer.
Police now had more than enough to charge Brandon Hill with murder. They went to his apartment to take him into custody, and there they found even more evidence tying him to the murder.
The police find a pair of sneakers with blood on them, and the blood matches Mike's blood.
Blood found on the shoes in the closet was almost indisputable evidence that Brandon Hill was at the crime scene. It linked him directly to the homicide, so we know he was there. There's no other explanation provided other than he had to have been the killer.
The blood on the shoes puts Brandon Hill at the scene of Mike's murder, and that puts the gun in his hand, the gun he's later arrested with. The cigarette trapped under Mike's body has Brandon's DNA, and now we know who the person is in the video talking to Mike just before Mike was shot and killed.
The murder of Michael Portaro devastated his family, and for a time it seemed as if no one would ever be charged. Now, with the arrest of Brandon Hill, their prayers had been answered. But then, the Portaros were dealt another blow.
As the trial of Brandon Hill is about to begin, the family suffers a terrible tragedy. They've already lost their son, and now they lose their daughter to an ATV accident.
Michael's sister died several months after the homicide, In between the time Brandon Hill was in custody, Michael's father passed away from cancer as well. So just a heartbreaking series of events, and highlights how when a murder happens, it's not just the victim, it's all those people around that person who suffer as well.
After years of twists and turns in the investigation, police finally charged the man responsible for Michael Portaro's death. And there was more heartbreak ahead for the Portaro family.
It was just one obstacle after another for this family in their pursuit of justice.
Four years after Vegas hip-hop artist Michael Portaro was shot and killed, Brandon Hill finally went to trial for the murder. The case was solved because of determined Las Vegas police investigators and Michael's family, who never gave up. How did the evidence play out in court against Brandon Hill?
The case against Brandon Hill was incredibly strong, and the jury had no trouble finding beyond a reasonable doubt that Brandon Hill had killed Mike, and Brandon was convicted of that crime.
He was subsequently sentenced to life in prison. However, he was given the opportunity at parole after approximately 28 years.
The Portaro family, who had suffered the pain of losing a child, was grateful that the killer was being held accountable. But there was even more they had to deal with.
It was just one obstacle after another for this family in their pursuit of justice. You know, Michael's sister had passed away, his father had passed away, and then as this case proceeded through the system, his mother also was diagnosed with cancer. Just a snowballing effect of tragedy for the family. And for his mother, it was a commitment for life to get justice for her son. She was committed to fighting through this diagnosis and seeing her son's killer held accountable in a court of law.
After the conviction, Cynthia's cancer goes into remission, and she finds renewed purpose in helping other people cope with grief. And she has had to suffer an incredible series of losses, but she finds solace and purpose in helping other people cope with grief, with loss.
As so often happens in a high-profile murder case like Michael Portaro's, after the verdict, people tend to move on and forget. But Cynthia Portaro has not. She has continued to speak about her loss in seminars and authored a book about her grief and forgiveness in an effort to help others. Solving the murder of Michael Portaro came down to the DNA evidence found on a cigarette. Without it, a killer would have gone free to kill again. Las Vegas police were determined to find Michael's killer and hold him accountable so he would never kill again. And now, it's time for today's Safety Spotlight. After the heartbreaking murder of Michael Portaro, his mother, Cynthia, showed tremendous strength and was eventually able to forgive her son's killer. For many survivors of a crime, however, they experience various roadblocks which prevent them from moving forward. Many survivors of crimes experience mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic disorder. But fortunately, help is available. You can contact the National Center for Victims of Crime at victimsofcrime.org. I'm Nancy O'Dell. For everyone here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe. Viola Drath, an accomplished writer and political advisor, trying to adjust to life as a widow after 40 years of marriage.
One of the things that jumped out at me about this case was that Viola Drath did not want to be alone. You know, people prey on that.
Albrecht Muth, a charismatic enigma claiming to be a European nobleman and a high-ranking soldier.
He was a very accomplished career con man. He was very successful in his cons early on. Then they would begin to fall apart because he couldn't quite hold them together.
And for her to have died the way she did, it was something that this city had never seen before.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to Georgetown, a neighborhood of Washington, D.C. The upper crust, the political, and the upscale live in this fashionable area of historic row houses and shops. But on a pleasant summer day, one couple played out the final chapter in their marriage. The wife lay dead on the bathroom floor, and the husband would spend years counterpunching against every police effort to find her killer.
This was called in to 911 by a gentleman named Albrecht Muth, M-U-T-H, as a natural death.
His wife, Viola Drath, was 91 years old. So could she have died from natural causes?
He said he came into the home, went straight to bed, wakes up the next morning and his wife is dead on the bathroom floor. He said it was the product of an apparent fall, where maybe she bumped her head or had a cardiac event.
The D.C. Metropolitan Police dispatched a special unit called the Natural Squad to examine the corpse.
This is the squad of detectives that go out and look at the crime scene, look at the victim, look at the circumstances, and try to make a determination whether this was a suspicious death or obviously a natural death where you really don't need police involvement.
The body in the bathroom raised too many red flags to label this as death from old age. The row house became the crime scene for a homicide with a victim who was very well known.
Viola Drath was legendary here in Washington, D.C.
She was a playwright, an author, a journalist of some note. She was on some White House boards and commissions. She was starting the D.C. chapter of the Blue Star Families, supporting parents who had children, adult children who were in combat in the military.
She hobnobbed with members of the White House and Supreme Court justices, ambassadors from various countries, actors and actresses.
Widowed when she was in her mid-60s, Viola Drath hoped to find love again. 4 years later, she remarried, but her new husband was something of a mystery.
What I was trying to figure out very early on, like within the first 48 to 72 hours when I was on this fresh murder case, was who in the world is Viola Drath's husband, Albrecht Muth. I didn't have any information that he wasn't who he was purporting to be.
Except what he purported to be was a general in the army of Iraq.
He walked around in this military uniform all year long, even in the summer, a heavy uniform, even in the summer, with a baton. Some people call it a riding crop or something, but he always called it a baton. He wore an eye patch that oftentimes would go from one eye to the next eye, depending on the day.
Clipped speech and a military posture completed the effect.
He was very eccentric. He would talk in that staccato German accent. And he was known in that neighborhood as being, there go that Muth guy. Everyone knew him. Everybody knew where he lived and who he was married to.
And who he was married to raised some eyebrows in the neighborhood. Why did the classy and sophisticated Viola Drath choose a husband who seemed a bit off-kilter?
He was very charismatic. He was 40 years younger than Miss Drath, and she fell for him.
She had known him before her first husband passed, but he became much more of a regular companion, notwithstanding the dramatic age difference, after her husband passed away.
That's when Albert Muth then moved in her life, I should say, and showed up with a rose on her doorstep, began visiting her on numerous occasions, would play the piano for her, would cook for her, would serve as her chauffeur, serve as her cook, would serve as her secretary, and he would dote on her.
In addition to being a soldier in the Foreign Army, Albrecht Muth appeared to be a hopeless romantic. But he also carried many secrets that would cause problems in his marriage to Viola Drath. Secrets that may have contributed to her death years later.
When this tragedy happened, a lot of people who knew her and saw her and Albert Muth together immediately suspected Albert Muth was behind this.
Morning in Georgetown, a ritzy area of the nation's capital. Detectives investigating the sudden passing of Viola Drath had serious doubts about her husband, whose worldliness and noble air didn't quite ring true.
He was able to be in any type of setting, whether it's on Congress, whether it's the White House, Supreme Court justices. He was able to move and study a person, study the surroundings, and able to have a dialogue with those individuals because he was a ferocious reader. He loved to read, and he was able to digest and take in things. And because of that, he was able to have conversations of just about any subject.
The murder of Viola Drath was more than a strange case of homicide. It was also a story about the human condition and those who take advantage of it. Case in point, a grieving widow.
Now, this was also a very important time for her when she was grieving the loss of her husband. Her adult children were out of the house, her adult grandchildren, they all had their own lives. And so she was very much afraid of being alone. And Albert Muth moved in and sort of took advantage, if you will, of her feeling of not wanting to be alone. And he made sure that she was never alone.
To find and prosecute Viola Drath's killer, the Department of Justice tapped Glenn Kirshner, an assistant U.S. attorney based in Washington, D.C. So after you looked at the crime scene, did Muth's story about his wife falling and hitting her head seem to make sense?
It wasn't long before we realized that the crime scene, their home on Q Street, had no forced entry. Everything was secured, doors and windows from the inside. There was nothing taken, ransacked, out of place.
Did Muth continue to maintain he had nothing to do with her death?
The story that he was peddling to the detectives who were interviewing him, first as a potential witness whose spouse had just been found dead in the bathroom, then as a person of interest as he morphed into a suspect, and ultimately as a defendant. The story Muth was peddling to the detectives was that, he went out the evening before, his wife was fine.
So what happened after Albrecht Muth went out for the evening? Sometimes the best sources of information are the people who live right next door.
Anytime there's a death, police will do a canvass of all of the surrounding homes to try to see if anybody heard anything, saw anything, or knew the victim, knew the suspect, Albrecht Muth. And we learned some interesting things from the neighbors.
The news media made its rounds as well. Reporter Keith Alexander of the Washington Post knocked on a few doors to gather details.
He was considered an eccentric neighbor. No one thought he was dangerous, but they always thought he was weird and quite full of himself.
To say they viewed Albrecht Muth as somewhat eccentric is perhaps an understatement. He would put on his Iraqi general uniform. He would, stroll around the streets of Georgetown, smoking a cigar, sometimes with a walking stick. He wouldn't really engage all that much with the neighbors, but they had the sense that it was not a good relationship between Albrecht Muth and his now deceased wife, Viola.
They say walls can talk, and this was especially true in Washington amongst the neighbors of Viola Drath and Albrecht Muth.
These are very expensive row houses, historic row houses in Washington, D.C., so the walls are connected, one home to another. Some of those walls are paper thin. They would hear sometimes, angry confrontations, arguments, yelling.
So what did the family of Viola Drath reveal to you about Muth's behavior immediately after his wife's death?
When Viola Drath's family came to the house, he presented Viola Drath's daughter with a letter, allegedly, that Viola Drath had written, in which she promised Albert Muth $200,000 if anything were to happen to her. A letter that, according to the family, was forged.
The most interesting conversation I had was probably with Viola Drath's grandson. He said, you know, Glenn, my step-grandfather is basically a career con man who has taken over a series of personalities over time. There was one point in time when Albrecht Muth was wearing an eye patch and peddling a story that he was a mercenary in South America and lost an eye, protecting a dignitary. And then weeks later, all of a sudden, the eye patch is gone, and I guess his eye got better.
What did you learn about him portraying himself as part of European nobility and wanting to be addressed as Count Albrecht?
What we began to learn was that he would take on a series of personas. He was a play actor, and he would then exploit those personas to whatever advantage he could. Sometimes it was financial, but often it was social. He was trying to sort of build this image of himself with various people that he would interact with.
Although her husband's chameleon-like behavior helped to sustain their active social life amongst VIPs in Washington, behind the doors of their home, Viola Drath was suffering in silence.
I think folks would describe him as an alcoholic, and he got very nasty when he was intoxicated. Sometimes he took it out on his wife with physical abuse, some of which was documented by the police over the years.
This appeared to be two people locked together in a dance that had no rhythm and no music.
Albrecht Muth and Viola Drath had what they called a marriage of convenience, which was more about companionship, and some people even said Muth would act as her butler at times, and she would pay him $2,000 a month. He never really was gainfully employed. He kind of lived off her both financially and socially. I call it living off her Rolodex, because she was very accomplished in Washington, D.C. circles.
So if she did feel like her husband was taking advantage of her, some wondered why she continued to stay in the relationship.
What I believe Albrecht Muth did with his wife's body was take it by the shoulders and drag it into the bathroom, laid her down on the bathroom floor, ramrod straight, to try to make it look like perhaps she had suffered some kind of a health event, cardiac event, fell on the bathroom floor and died.
There were only two people in this Georgetown row house on a hot August night, and one of them was dead. The other, Albrecht Muth, insisted that his wife's death was accidental.
He said he came into the home, went straight to bed, wakes up the next morning and his wife is dead on the bathroom floor. He said it was the product of an apparent fall, where maybe she bumped her head or had a cardiac event, but what we learned from the autopsy was that Viola Drath had been murdered.
What did the autopsy reveal about the condition of the body?
She had bilateral rib fractures up and down her chest, as if somebody had been straddling her, placing a significant amount of pressure on her. She had a broken hyoid bone, which is a delicate bone in the human throat, which when somebody is manually strangled, often it becomes fractured. It's a telltale sign of manual strangulation. She had a thumbnail completely ripped off as if during a struggle.
Police say it was quite possible that Albrecht Muth had beaten his wife to death. She had put up with a lot over the years.
One of the things that's so very sad about this case is that there were early signs of verbal and physical abuse. She took out restraining orders against him, but she would never follow through.
But the authorities were catching up with Albrecht Muth. The U.S. Attorney's Office arrested him and sent him to Superior Court. Accused of murdering his wife, Muth insisted that he was innocent.
But did you kill him?
I did not kill my wife.
You did not kill your wife?
No. Am I under suspicion?
Well, I just have a... If it's just
That is a legal question. Am I a suspect? Oh, of course I'm a suspect. That's correct.
I mean, it's just you and your wife at home?
Yes, yes, yes.
And your wife ends up murdered?
Yes, I guess I think so. Yeah. Good. What do we do?
Given the evidence against him, Muth changed his tune.
His story then changed from that she fell to it was a hit. Iran put a hit out on his wife, and that his wife was a victim of assassination. So that was his defense. Prosecutors obviously did not buy any of that.
Before and during the trial, prosecutors tried to prevent the defendant from turning the proceedings into a circus. But police say Muth was an expert ringmaster.
We managed to defeat his claim that he was not competent to stand trial because he was suffering from a delusional disorder that really made him believe he was an Iraqi general. And then once we overcame that obstacle that he tried to throw up, he decided his next attempt to avoid going to trial would be to starve himself into incapacitation.
Frail from lack of food, Muth communicated from a horizontal position, lying in a hospital bed.
We had to have him evaluated by mental health experts, forensic psychologists, and he hired his own forensic psychiatrists and psychologists, and we had what we referred to as the battle of the experts, and we litigated the longest running competency hearing in the history of the DC courts, according to the judge who presided.
But even with all his drama, the jury wasn't buying it.
Once we were in trial, he was convicted handily of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances because the nature of the crime was cruel, atrocious, and heinous, which is an aggravating circumstance under DC law, and his wife was especially vulnerable given her age, which is another aggravating circumstance. The judge sentenced him on the first-degree murder conviction to 50 years in prison.
One more mystery in this bizarre story: why did Albrecht Muth kill his wife? He had no inheritance, no benefits if Viola Drath passed away, and they were 20 years into their marriage. And police say on that fateful August night, Viola Drath suffered her husband's wrath once again, except this time, she wouldn't survive. Was it a marriage of love, companionship, or convenience? Both Viola Drath and Albrecht Muth made critical decisions that eventually destroyed their relationship. Her choice to stay no matter what, his choice to use her until it no longer mattered. And now it is time for today's Safety Spotlight. Senior citizens may be more vulnerable to victimization and abuse. Almost 50% of reported cases of elder abuse are perpetrated by a family member. A victim may fear that if they report their loved one, that person may go to prison and leave them without care. In some cases, a senior may be too embarrassed or ashamed to report abuse. Other victims may fear retaliation from their caregiver. In these cases, it is crucial for loved ones or professionals to recognize signs of abuse and report it. To report elder abuse, call 911 or reach out to your local adult protective services. For all of us here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.